Sometimes the most ordinary Tuesday afternoon can become the day that changes everything. Sometimes a father's worst nightmare becomes someone else's salvation. And sometimes the skills learned in the darkest corners of the world find their purpose in the most unexpected moments on a quiet suburban street. This is the story of how one man's past collided with his present in the most terrifying way imaginable, and how split-second decisions made the difference between a family's worst day and their greatest miracle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It's about the invisible threads that connect strangers, the weight of training that never truly leaves you, and the moment when everything you've ever learned becomes the only thing standing between innocence and evil. The lunch crowd at Murphy's Auto Repair had thinned to just a few stragglers when Marcus Thompson wiped his hands on the oil-stained rag hanging from his belt. The familiar weight of the wrench in his back pocket and the scent of motor oil that had permanently embedded itself in his work clothes were constants in a life that had been rebuilt from the ground up. He glanced at the digital clock mounted above the service bay, its red numbers glowing 2:47 p.m. against the concrete wall. School would be letting out in 30 minutes. Marcus had developed the habit of checking the time obsessively during the final hour of his workday. Not because he was eager to leave, quite the opposite. The auto shop had become his sanctuary, a place where problems had solutions, where broken things could be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. But at 3 p.m. sharp, his real job began. The job that mattered more than any paycheck, more than any customer satisfaction survey, more than anything else in his carefully constructed world, being Emma's dad. He folded the work order for Mrs. Patterson's sedan and slipped it into the filing cabinet that had seen better decades. The repair had been straightforward enough, a worn timing belt and a coolant leak that had been masquerading as something more serious. Marcus took pride in his diagnostic skills, the way he could listen to an engine's complaints and translate them into actionable solutions. It was a talent that had served him well both in his current life and in the one he'd left behind 8 years ago. The transition from Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, Army Ranger, to Marcus Thompson, single father and mechanic, hadn't been seamless. There had been sleepless nights when Emma was teething, when her cries would trigger something primal in him, sending his mind racing back to compound walls and midnight patrols. There had been moments of crushing self-doubt when other parents would discuss college funds and piano lessons while he calculated whether they could afford both groceries and the electricity bill in the same week. But those early struggles had forged something unbreakable between him and his daughter. Emma had never known her mother, who had died in a car accident when Emma was barely 6 months old. She had never known a version of her father who could afford to be anything less than completely present, completely committed, completely hers. In return, she had given him a purpose that made sense of everything he had been through, everything he had learned, everything he had survived. The shop's radio crackled with a weather update: clear skies, temperature holding steady at 68 degrees, perfect October afternoon. Marcus smiled, thinking of Emma's insistence that morning that she didn't need her jacket. He had watched her skip down the front steps of their modest duplex, her backpack bouncing against her small frame, her dark hair catching the sunlight, in a way that always reminded him how much she looked like her mother. At 7 years old, Emma possessed a confidence that sometimes amazed him, a certainty about her place in the world that he envied. Tony Ritchie, the shop owner, emerged from his office clutching a coffee mug that had seen better decades. His gray hair was perpetually disheveled, his coveralls bearing the accumulated stains of 30 years in the business. Tony had hired Marcus without much fanfare 3 years ago, asking few questions about his background and caring only about his ability to diagnose problems and fix them efficiently. It was exactly the kind of no-nonsense arrangement that Marcus preferred. "Thompson, you heading out soon?" Tony asked, settling onto the worn stool beside the parts counter. The question was rhetorical. Tony knew Marcus's schedule better than anyone. Every weekday at 2:50 p.m., Marcus would begin his closing routine. By 2:58 p.m., he would be in his truck, engine running, ready to make the 12-minute drive to Riverside Elementary. "Just finishing up Mrs. Patterson's invoice," Marcus replied, closing the filing cabinet with a metallic click. "She said she'll be by tomorrow morning to settle up." Tony nodded, sipping his coffee with the careful appreciation of a man who had learned to find pleasure in small rituals. "Take your time with the Morrison transmission tomorrow. That thing's been giving people fits for weeks. I told Joe Morrison it might take a couple days to get it right." Marcus appreciated Tony's patience with complicated jobs. Too many shops rushed repairs to maximize turnover, but Tony understood that some problems required time and careful attention. It was one of the reasons Marcus had stayed at Murphy's longer than he'd initially planned. The work environment suited his temperament, his need for methodical problem-solving without external pressure. He gathered his personal tools, sliding them into the worn canvas bag that had accompanied him through 3 deployments and countless moves. The tools themselves were a mix of military issue and civilian purchases, each one selected for reliability and precision. His knife, a fixed-blade Kabar that rode in a leather sheath on his belt, drew occasional curious glances from customers, but Tony had never asked about it. Some things didn't require explanation. The October air carried a crisp promise of the approaching winter, and Marcus inhaled deeply as he stepped outside. The shop occupied a corner lot in what had once been a thriving industrial district, now transitioning into an eclectic mix of small businesses and converted lofts. Across the street, a coffee roastery filled the air with rich, complex aromas that blended surprisingly well with the mechanical sense of the auto shop. 2 blocks east, the Riverside neighborhood began in earnest tree-lined streets giving way to modest homes and well-maintained sidewalks. Marcus's truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 with 180,000 miles and a determination to reach 300,000, started with the reliable rumble that had become the soundtrack to his daily routine. The bench seat bore the accumulated wear of a vehicle that had been purchased for utility rather than comfort, but it had never failed to get him where he needed to go. Emma had named the truck Blue Thunder during her superhero phase 2 years ago, and the name had stuck despite the vehicle's distinctly non-thunderous appearance. The drive to Riverside Elementary took him through neighborhoods that told the story of a city in gradual transition. Past the renovated Victorian houses, where young professionals hung bicycles on front porches and planted native gardens. Past the apartments where immigrant families crowded around small balconies, children's voices mixing with the sounds of cooking and music from a dozen different cultures. Past the community center where Marcus had signed Emma up for swimming lessons, where she had discovered her love of the water and her complete lack of fear when it came to jumping off diving boards. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus had chosen their duplex specifically for its proximity to Riverside Elementary. The school had a reputation for dedicated teachers and a strong community feel, exactly what he wanted for Emma's formative years. More importantly, it was close enough that he could be there quickly if needed, but far enough from the shop that Emma's school world and his work world remained separate spheres. He pulled into the familiar parking spot across from the school's main entrance at 2:59 p.m., a full minute to spare. Through the windshield, he could see other parents beginning to gather on the sidewalk, a mixture of stay-at-home mothers with younger children in strollers, older grandparents with patient expressions, and a few other working parents who had adjusted their schedules around the sacred ritual of school pickup. Marcus recognized most of the regular faces by now, though his interactions remained polite but distant. He had learned to navigate the social dynamics of elementary school parenthood with the same careful attention he had once applied to reading terrain in hostile environments. There were unspoken hierarchies, alliance structures, and communication patterns that required observation and adaptation rather than direct engagement. Mrs. Chun, whose daughter Lucy was in Emma's class, waved from beside her silver minivan. Marcus returned the gesture with a slight nod, appreciating her consistent friendliness without feeling obligated to extend the interaction. Mr. Rodriguez, a fellow single father whose son played on the same soccer team as Emma, raised his hand in acknowledgement from his position near the crosswalk. These brief exchanges constituted the extent of Marcus's social involvement in the school community, and it suited him perfectly. The school building itself was a study in practical architecture from the 1970s, all brown brick and wide windows designed to maximize natural light while minimizing maintenance costs. Emma had described every classroom, every hallway, every corner of the playground with the detailed enthusiasm that only a 7-year-old could muster. Marcus knew about the art teacher who let students stay after class to work on special projects, about the cafeteria lady who always saved the best chocolate milk for kids who said please, about the playground equipment that had been upgraded over the summer to include a new climbing structure that Emma had immediately christened Mount Awesome. At exactly 3:02 p.m., the first wave of students began emerging from the building. Kindergartners appeared first, escorted by teachers and moving with the careful supervision required for 5-year-olds, navigating the complexities of backpack management and parent identification. First and second graders followed, their movements more confident, but still requiring the watchful eyes of crossing guards and parent volunteers. Marcus scanned the crowd for Emma's distinctive purple backpack, a birthday gift she had selected, specifically because it was the exact same color as grape popsicles. Her class usually emerged around 3:05 p.m., giving Mrs. Henderson time to organize the daily folder distribution and deliver whatever messages needed to reach parents. Emma was typically among the first students out the door, her eagerness to share the day's adventures propelling her forward with barely contained energy. 3:05 p.m. came and went. Marcus felt the first stirring of unease, a subtle shift in his nervous system that he recognized but didn't yet acknowledge. Emma was occasionally held up by forgotten homework or an extended conversation with friends, but she was remarkably consistent about appearing when expected. He told himself that Mrs. Henderson might be dealing with a behavioral issue, or that Emma had been selected to help with classroom cleanup duties. 3:07 p.m. Other second-grade students were now visible on the sidewalk, reuniting with waiting adults and beginning their journeys home. Marcus recognized several of Emma's classmates, Jake Morrison with his perpetually untied shoelaces, Sarah Kim clutching the latest installment in her favorite book series, Tommy Walsh whose backpack was larger than he was. But no purple backpack. No Emma. Marcus stepped out of the truck, his movement automatic and purposeful. The unease was becoming something more specific now, a focused alertness that made him hyper-aware of his surroundings. He approached the main entrance where Mrs. Patterson, no relation to the sedan owner, was stationed with her clipboard and volunteer badge. Mrs. Patterson had been managing school pickup for 7 years and knew every child, every parent, every variation in routine. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice carrying the controlled calm that had once been essential for radio communications in combat zones. "I haven't seen Emma Thompson come out yet. Is Mrs. Henderson's class running late today?" Mrs. Patterson consulted her clipboard with the efficiency of someone accustomed to tracking multiple moving parts. "Mrs. Henderson's class finished dismissal about 5 minutes ago. Let me check with the office to see if Emma's been held for any reason." The suggestion made logical sense, but something in Marcus's gut rejected it. Emma was conscientious about following procedures, about being where she was supposed to be when she was supposed to be there. If she had been kept after school for any reason, she would have found a way to send word. The realization crystallized into something approaching alarm. Mrs. Patterson returned from her brief conversation with the front office, her expression shifting from helpful efficiency to concerned confusion. The office doesn't show any record of Emma being held today. Mrs. Henderson left about 10 minutes ago for a dentist appointment, but she didn't mention any issues with Emma's dismissal. Marcus felt his training asserting itself, the systematic approach to problem-solving that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. First priority, gather information. Second priority, identify potential courses of action. Third priority, execute the most promising solution while preparing contingencies. "Did anyone see her leave the building?" he asked, his voice remaining steady despite the alarm bells beginning to sound in his subconscious. Another teacher, maybe, or one of the crossing guards. Mrs. Patterson was already moving toward the radio clipped to her jacket, her own concern becoming visible. "Let me check with the crossing guards. Sometimes kids take different routes or stop to talk with friends." While Mrs. Patterson coordinated with the crossing guards stationed at the school's 3 main exit points, Marcus began his own reconnaissance. He walked the perimeter of the school building, checking the side entrances that students sometimes use during recess or dismissal. His eyes swept the playground equipment, the basketball courts, the covered areas where kids might linger after. The final bell. The crossing guard at the corner of Maple and 3rd Street reported seeing Emma around 3:03 p.m., walking in the direction of the community center rather than toward the main pickup area. The information was both reassuring and troubling. It confirmed that Emma had left the school safely, but raised questions about why she had deviated from their established routine. Marcus thanked Mrs. Patterson and returned to his truck, his mind already mapping the route between the school and the community center. Emma knew she was supposed to wait for him at the main entrance, but she also knew the neighborhood well, enough to navigate safely. Perhaps she had forgotten something at the community center from her swimming lesson the previous day. Perhaps she had arranged to meet a friend. Perhaps she was simply taking a different path for the adventure of it. The community center was a 12-minute walk from the school, following sidewalks that Emma had traveled dozens of times under Marcus's supervision. The route passed through residential neighborhoods with good visibility and regular foot traffic. The kind of area where a 7-year-old could walk safely during daylight hours. Marcus had specifically chosen their living situation to enable this kind of independence, believing that Emma needed to develop confidence in navigating her world. He drove slowly along the route, scanning sidewalks and checking the small parks where Emma might have stopped to play. The October afternoon remained clear and pleasant, with enough foot traffic to suggest that Emma wouldn't have been walking alone. A group of teenagers was shooting baskets at the court near Riverside Park. An elderly man was walking a small dog along the tree-lined section of Maple Street. 2 mothers were pushing strollers while engaged in animated conversation. Normal neighborhood life, proceeding at its usual pace, blissfully unaware that Marcus's world was beginning to shift into something resembling controlled panic. The community center occupied a converted warehouse building that had been transformed into a multi-purpose facility serving the diverse needs of the Riverside neighborhood. Emma's swimming lessons took place in the pool complex on the building's north side, but the facility also housed basketball courts, meeting rooms, a small library branch, and a childcare center. Marcus had spent enough time there over the past year to know the staff and to feel confident about Emma's familiarity with the building. He parked in the visitor lot and approached the main reception desk, where Jennifer Castillo was sorting mail with the methodical attention of someone nearing the end of a long shift. Jennifer had checked Emma in for swimming lessons countless times and always remembered to ask about her progress in school or her latest artistic endeavors. "Hi, Mr. Thompson," Jennifer said, looking up from the mail sorting with a smile that quickly shifted to concern when she registered Marcus's expression. "Is everything okay?" Emma's not scheduled for lessons today, is she? She didn't show up for pickup at school, Marcus explained, maintaining his calm exterior while his internal alarm system continued to escalate. One of the crossing guards saw her walking in this direction. I thought she might have stopped by for some reason. Jennifer's concern deepened as she reached for the phone. Let me check with the pool staff and the after-school program coordinator. If she's here, someone will have seen her. The after-school program coordinator, an energetic college student named David, emerged from the gymnasium where he had been supervising a group of older kids playing dodgeball. He knew Emma well from her occasional participation in the programs, art activities, but he hadn't seen her today. The pool staff confirmed that no children had accessed the pool area outside of scheduled lesson times. Marcus thanked them and returned to his truck, the systematic search beginning to yield unwelcome conclusions. Emma had been seen walking toward the community center but hadn't arrived there. The route between the two locations was straightforward, with minimal opportunities for deviation. Either she had changed course en route, or something had interrupted her journey. He retraced the route more carefully this time, stopping at the small businesses that lined Maple Street. The owner of Corner Market, an elderly Korean man named Mr. Park, recognized Emma's description but hadn't seen her today. The barista at Riverside Coffee, a young woman with elaborate tattoos covering both arms, shook her head apologetically. The manager of the used bookstore where Emma sometimes browsed the children's section on weekends confirmed that she hadn't been in. By 3:45 p.m., Marcus had exhausted the logical possibilities. Emma had left school at the expected time, had been seen walking in a familiar direction, but had never reached her apparent destination. The conclusion that remained was the one that every parent feared, the scenario that transformed ordinary Tuesday afternoons into every family's worst nightmare. Emma was missing. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow, sending his carefully controlled emotional state into something approaching free fall. But beneath the surge of parental terror, his training reasserted itself with crystalline clarity. He had operated in environments where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death, where emotional responses could compromise mission success and endanger lives. This was no different. Emma's safety depended on his ability to think clearly, to assess the situation accurately, and to take appropriate action. He pulled into the parking lot of a small strip mall and reached for his phone, his fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. The call to 911 was brief and professional, delivered in the same tone he had once used to request emergency medical evacuation or close air support. Location, description, timeline, relevant details. No speculation, no emotional elaboration. Just the essential information that responding officers would need to begin their own assessment. The dispatcher, a woman with a calm, measured voice that suggested extensive experience with emergency calls, asked the standard questions and provided the standard reassurances. Officers would be dispatched immediately. A description of Emma would be broadcast to all units in the area. The school would be contacted to verify the timeline and gather additional information. Everything possible was being done. Marcus ended the call and sat in the sudden silence of his truck, watching normal afternoon life continue around him. A woman emerged from the grocery store struggling with an armload of shopping bags. A teenager, on a skateboard, executed a series of tricks in the strip mall's empty loading zone. A maintenance worker was replacing burned-out bulbs in the signs above the storefronts. The ordinary world, proceeding as if nothing had changed, while Emma was somewhere unknown, possibly afraid, possibly in danger, possibly calling for a father who had always promised to protect her, but who had somehow failed at the most fundamental responsibility of parenthood. Marcus forced himself to breathe slowly, to engage the mental discipline that had carried him through combat operations and personal crises. Panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. Self-recrimination was counterproductive. Emma needed him to be the person he had trained to be, the person who could function effectively under pressure, who could assess threats and develop solutions even when everything felt like it was falling apart. The first police unit arrived. Within 8 minutes, a patrol car driven by Officer Sarah Martinez, a compact woman in her early 30s whose demeanor suggested competence without unnecessary drama. Marcus had interacted with local law enforcement, occasionally in his role as a veteran advocate, and he appreciated Officer Martinez's direct approach to information gathering. She asked the same questions the dispatcher had asked, but with additional detail and follow-up inquiries that demonstrated her experience with missing child cases. Emma's physical description, her typical behavior patterns, any recent changes in routine or family circumstances. The names and contact information for Emma's friends, teachers, and other regular contacts. Marcus's own background and relationship. With Emma, delivered in a tone that managed to be thorough without being accusatory. Officer Martinez took notes in a small spiral-bound notebook, her handwriting precise and efficient. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask about Emma's mother. Is there any possibility that she might have picked Emma up from school?" "Emma's mother died when she was 6 months old," Marcus replied, the words carrying the weight of a grief that had been processed but never fully resolved. "There's no other family involved in Emma's care. It's just the two of us." The information seemed to shift something in Officer Martinez's assessment. Single-parent households presented different dynamics than cases involving custody disputes or family complications. The absence of a second parent as a potential explanation meant that other possibilities required more immediate attention. "We'll expand the search area and coordinate with the school district security protocols," Officer Martinez said, closing her notebook with a decisive snap. "I'm also going to request assistance from our K-9 unit and alert the detectives who specialize in missing children cases." The mention of specialized detectives caused something cold to settle in Marcus's chest. He understood the statistical realities, the windows of time that were critical in missing child cases, the difference between children who wandered off and children who were taken. Officer Martinez was implementing protocols that suggested she was preparing for the more serious possibilities. A second patrol car arrived as they were speaking, followed by an unmarked sedan that Marcus recognized as a detective vehicle. The response was escalating with the kind of rapid coordination that spoke to extensive training and established procedures. Marcus felt simultaneously grateful for the professional response and terrified by its implications. Detective Ray Coleman emerged from the unmarked sedan with the measured movements of someone accustomed to crime scenes and crisis management. He was a tall, lean man in his late 40s, his gray hair cut with military precision, his clothing practical rather than fashionable. When he approached Marcus, his handshake was firm and his eye contact direct. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Detective Coleman. I understand your daughter Emma has been missing for approximately an hour. I'd like to walk through the timeline again and get some additional background information that might help us locate her quickly." The questions became more detailed, more psychological in their focus. Emma's personality traits, her likelihood of talking to strangers, her response to authority figures, her problem-solving skills when faced with unexpected situations. Marcus found himself providing information that felt both essential and inadequate, describing a 7-year-old's character in terms that might determine her survival. Emma was outgoing but not naive, he explained. She had been taught about stranger danger, but also raised to be helpful and polite. She was intelligent and resourceful for her age, but she was still a child who might make decisions based on immediate circumstances rather than long-term consequences. She trusted adults in positions of authority and might respond to someone who claimed to need help or who presented themselves as a legitimate authority figure. Detective Coleman listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a leather portfolio that looked like it had seen extensive use. His questions revealed a depth of experience with child psychology and predator behavior that Marcus found both reassuring and deeply unsettling. This was a man who had worked cases that no parent wanted to imagine, who had seen outcomes that ranged from miraculous reunions to devastating tragedies. "Mr. Thompson, I need to ask about your military service," Detective Coleman said, his tone suggesting that the question was relevant rather than merely curious. "Officer Martinez mentioned that you're a veteran. What was your specialty, and when did you complete your service?" Marcus provided a brief summary of his 8 years as an Army Ranger, including 3 combat deployments and specialized training in reconnaissance, tactical medicine, and small unit operations. He had left the service following his wife's death, choosing to focus on raising Emma rather than pursuing a military career. His skills remained sharp through ongoing training and his work with veteran organizations, but his priorities had fundamentally shifted. Detective Coleman absorbed this information with obvious interest. That background could be relevant in several ways. If someone has targeted Emma specifically because of your military service, they might expect you to respond in predictable ways. On the other hand, your training gives you capabilities that most parents don't have when it comes to search and recovery operations. The suggestion that Emma might have been targeted specifically because of Marcus's background introduced a new dimension of terror. He had been careful to maintain a low profile since leaving the service, avoiding the kind of public visibility that might attract unwanted attention. But determined individuals with sufficient resources could certainly piece together information about his military service and his current circumstances. "Have you received any unusual communications recently?" Detective Coleman continued. "Phone calls, emails, letters, anything that seemed out of the ordinary or potentially threatening." Marcus mentally reviewed the past several weeks, searching for any interaction that might have seemed suspicious in retrospect. His life was deliberately routine, structured around work and Emma's needs, with minimal social complexity. The customers at the auto shop, the parents at Emma's school, the staff at the community center all represented familiar patterns of interaction that hadn't raised any alarm signals. But as he considered Detective Coleman's question more carefully, one interaction began to stand out. 3 weeks ago, a man had brought a luxury sedan to the shop for routine maintenance. Nothing unusual about the work order or the vehicle itself. But the man had asked several questions about Marcus's background that had seemed like casual conversation at the time. Questions about how long he had lived in the area, whether he had family nearby, what Emma's school schedule looked like. Marcus had answered politely but briefly, thinking the man was simply making conversation while waiting for his vehicle. But the questions had been more specific than typical customer small talk, and the man had seemed to retain information with unusual attention. Marcus described the interaction to Detective Coleman, providing as much detail as he could recall about the man's appearance and behavior. Detective Coleman made extensive notes about the incident, asking follow-up questions about the vehicle, the work order, and any contact information the customer had provided. "We'll definitely want to follow up on that lead. Do you still have the paperwork from that service appointment?" Marcus confirmed that the work order would be in the shop's filing system, along with any contact information the customer had provided. Tony might also remember additional details about the interaction, since he had handled the initial consultation while Marcus was working on another vehicle. The possibility that Emma's disappearance might be connected to a seemingly innocent interaction weeks earlier was both terrifying and somehow reassuring. It suggested a level of planning that might also mean the perpetrator had specific goals, rather than random violent intent. By 4:30 p.m., the parking lot of the strip mall had been transformed into an impromptu command center. Additional patrol units had arrived to begin systematic searches of the surrounding area. A canine unit was preparing to trace Emma's scent from the school to wherever the trail might lead. Detective Coleman had coordinated with the FBI's local field office to ensure that Federal resources would be available if the investigation expanded beyond local jurisdiction. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of being both the primary victim's family member and a potential resource for the investigation. His military background meant that he understood tactical planning and search operations in ways that most civilian parents couldn't. Detective Coleman had made it clear that Marcus's expertise would be valuable, but also that he would need to balance his knowledge with the emotional reality of searching for his own child. "We're going to find her," Detective Coleman said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had delivered that promise before and had the experience to make it meaningful. "But I need you to be prepared for the possibility that this might take time and that we might encounter scenarios that test your training and your emotional resilience." Marcus nodded, understanding the implicit message. Emma's disappearance might not resolve quickly or easily. There might be demands for ransom or evidence of violence, or extended periods of uncertainty that would challenge every coping mechanism he had developed. His military training would be an asset, but it would also be tested in ways that combat operations had never approached. The K-9 unit began their work at Riverside Elementary, allowing the German Shepherd to establish Emma's scent trail from the main entrance where she had last been seen. Marcus watched the dog work with professional interest, noting the handler's techniques and the systematic approach to scent tracking. The dog followed a clear trail along the sidewalk toward Maple Street, confirming the crossing guard's observation about Emma's direction of travel. But 3 blocks from the school, at the intersection of Maple and Oak Street, the dog lost the trail. The handler, a veteran officer named Tom Bradley, explained the significance with grim professionalism. "The scent trail ends here, which usually means one of 2 things. Either Emma got into a vehicle at this location, or someone carried her away from this point." Marcus stared at the intersection, a perfectly ordinary corner in a perfectly ordinary neighborhood, where families lived quiet lives and children walked safely to and from school. Nothing about the location suggested danger or vulnerability. No secluded areas where a vehicle could wait unobserved. No obvious tactical advantages for someone planning an abduction. But the scent trail didn't lie. Emma had been at this intersection approximately an hour and 15 minutes ago, and then she had simply vanished. Detective Coleman coordinated an immediate canvass of the surrounding area, with officers questioning residents and business owners about any unusual activity or unfamiliar vehicles they might have observed between 3 o'clock and 3:15 p.m. Marcus joined the canvass, his military bearing and obvious emotional investment, opening doors and encouraging cooperation from people who might have been less forthcoming with uniformed officers. Mrs. Elizabeth Harper, an elderly woman who lived in the house directly across from the intersection, provided the first significant lead. She had been watering plants on her front porch around 3:05 p.m. when she noticed a dark blue van parked along Oak Street. The van had seemed out of place because it wasn't a delivery vehicle, and none of her neighbors owned a van of that description. "It was there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, Mrs. Harper explained, her voice trembling slightly as she realized the significance of her observation. "I noticed it because the driver was just sitting there, not making deliveries or visiting anyone. Then I heard a car door slam, and when I looked again, the van was driving away." The timing aligned perfectly with Emma's disappearance. Marcus felt something cold and focus settling into his chest as he processed the information. This wasn't a crime of opportunity or a random encounter. Someone had been waiting at that intersection, positioned to intercept Emma during her walk from school. Detective Coleman immediately coordinated with the state police to issue an alert for dark blue vans in the region, while also requesting any available surveillance footage from nearby businesses or traffic cameras. The investigation was shifting from a missing child case to a confirmed abduction, with all the urgency and resources that classification demanded. Marcus stood at the intersection where his daughter had last been seen, his training allowing. him to visualize the tactical situation with painful clarity. The abductor had positioned their vehicle with good visibility in both directions, enabling them to spot Emma's approach while maintaining escape routes. The timing suggested advance knowledge of Emma's routine and her likely path from school. The location provided enough privacy to complete the abduction without immediate witnesses, while being ordinary enough to avoid attracting attention. Someone had studied Emma's patterns, had learned her schedule, had planned this abduction with military-level precision. The realization filled Marcus with a rage so pure and focused that it felt like a physical weight in his chest. But beneath the rage, his training asserted itself with crystalline clarity. Emma had been taken by someone who understood surveillance and tactical planning. But Marcus had spent 8 years learning to hunt people who thought they understood those same concepts. He had tracked insurgents through urban environments and rural terrain, had located high-value targets who had every advantage of local knowledge and preparation. Whoever had taken Emma had made one critical error in their planning. They had chosen to target the daughter of someone who possessed the skills, the experience, and the absolute determination to track them down. The hunt was about to begin. As the sun began to set over Riverside, casting long shadows across the intersection where Emma had vanished, Marcus Thompson felt his civilian life sliding away like an old skin. The careful routine of auto repair and school pickup and bedtime stories was being replaced by something older, something harder, something that had been forged in the mountains of Afghanistan and the urban warfare of Iraq. Tomorrow, Detective Coleman and the FBI would continue their methodical investigation, following leads and processing evidence according to established protocols. But tonight, Marcus would begin his own preparation, reviewing maps and transportation routes, analyzing the tactical challenges of the abduction, and developing contingency plans for every scenario his military experience suggested might unfold. Emma was out there somewhere, possibly afraid, possibly hurt, certainly in the hands of someone who had demonstrated planning and capability that made them extremely dangerous. But she was also the daughter of a man who had spent years learning to find people who didn't want to be found, to rescue assets from hostile territory, to achieve mission success regardless of the obstacles. The abductor had Emma, but Marcus had something they couldn't possibly have. Anticipated, the absolute determination of a father whose entire world had just been stolen, combined with the lethal skills of a soldier who had never failed a mission. When lives were on the line, Emma was coming home. Whatever it took, whoever had to pay the price, whatever skills had to be resurrected from the darkest chapters of his military service, Emma was coming home. The intersection fell silent as the official search teams coordinated their next moves and civilian traffic resumed its normal patterns. But Marcus remained standing where his daughter's trail had ended, his eyes scanning the surrounding terrain with the systematic attention of someone planning an operation. Somewhere in this city, Emma was waiting for her father to find her. And Marcus Thompson, Army Ranger, was about to remind the world why elite soldiers never leave anyone behind. The fluorescent lights in the Riverside Police Department cast harsh shadows across Detective Coleman's desk as Marcus settled into the uncomfortable metal chair across from him. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m., but time had lost its normal, meaning somewhere between the moment Emma vanished and now. Marcus's internal chronometer, honed through years of military operations, told him that his daughter had been missing for 8 hours and 43 minutes. Every second felt like a small eternity stretching into an abyss of possibility he refused to contemplate. Detective Coleman spread a series of photographs across the desk surface, each one showing different angles of the intersection where Emma's scent trail had ended. The images had been taken during the afternoon search, capturing the mundane details of suburban life that had somehow become the backdrop for his worst nightmare. A fire hydrant painted bright yellow, a stop sign slightly tilted from some long ago. Impact, the corner mailbox where neighborhood kids sometimes left chalk drawings. We've identified 3 potential surveillance cameras that might have captured relevant footage, Detective Coleman said, his voice carrying the measured tone of someone delivering information that could change everything or nothing. The corner, Market 2 blocks east, has an exterior camera that covers part of Oak Street. There's a traffic light camera at the main intersection of Maple and 3rd that might have caught vehicles turning onto Oak, and the community center has security cameras covering their parking lot, which could show us the van's approach or departure route. Marcus studied the photographs with the systematic attention he had once applied to aerial reconnaissance images in Afghanistan. Each detail could be significant. The angle of approach that would provide the best visibility while minimizing exposure. The escape routes that would allow rapid egress while avoiding main thoroughfares where traffic cameras might capture license plate information. The timing that would balance the need for surveillance with the risk of attracting attention from residents or passing pedestrians. The corner market's camera system is older, probably early digital from maybe 8 years ago, Detective Coleman continued. The image quality won't be perfect, but it should be sufficient to identify vehicle types and possibly get partial license plate information. The traffic camera has better resolution, but it's positioned to monitor traffic violations rather than street-level activity. Marcus nodded, his mind automatically calculating sightlines and coverage zones. What about the community center cameras? Those would be newer systems, probably installed when they upgraded the facility. Exactly. Jennifer Castillo provided access to their security system about an hour ago. The cameras cover the parking lot and the main approaches to the building. But more importantly, they're positioned to monitor the street that runs behind the community center. If the van used that route to avoid the main roads, we should have clear footage. The possibility of visual evidence created a strange mixture of hope and dread in Marcus's chest. Seeing Emma's abduction on camera would confirm his worst fears about what had happened to her, but it would also provide the first concrete lead toward finding her. More importantly, it would give him his first look at the person who had taken his daughter. Detective Coleman's phone buzzed with an incoming message, and he glanced at the screen before looking back at Marcus with an expression that suggested significant developments. The FBI's technical team has arrived to process the surveillance footage. Agent Sarah Chun specializes in digital forensics and image enhancement. She's been working missing children cases for 6 years. Marcus appreciated the professional competence that seemed to characterize everyone involved in Emma's case, but he also understood the implications of FBI involvement. Local police departments called in federal resources when cases crossed state lines, involved organized crime, or presented the potential for outcomes that required specialized expertise. Emma's abduction was being treated as a serious federal crime with national implications. Agent Chun appeared in the doorway of Detective Coleman's office with the precise timing that suggested she had been monitoring their conversation. She was a compact woman in her early 30s, her black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her clothing chosen for functionality rather than fashion. She carried a laptop computer and a canvas bag filled with equipment that Marcus recognized as advanced digital analysis tools. Mr. Thompson, I understand your daughter was taken from the intersection of Maple and Oak at approximately 3:05 this afternoon, Agent Chun said, settling into the third chair in Detective Coleman's cramped office. I've been reviewing the preliminary reports, and I have some questions that might help us narrow our search parameters. The questions were different from those Detective Coleman had asked earlier, focusing on technical details that revealed Agent Chun's specialized expertise, Emma's digital footprint, including any social media presence or online gaming accounts that might have exposed her routine to potential predators, Marcus's own online activity, particularly any veteran forums or professional networks that might have revealed information about his family situation. recent changes in Emma's behavior or routine that might have attracted unwanted attention. Marcus found himself providing information he hadn't considered relevant to a typical missing child case. Emma didn't have her own devices or social media accounts, but she occasionally used Marcus's tablet to play educational games or video chat with her aunt in Colorado. Marcus maintained a minimal online presence, but he did participate in veteran advocacy forums and had recently been featured in a local newspaper article about the transition from military service to civilian careers. The newspaper article could be significant, Agent Chun said, making notes in a digital tablet with practiced efficiency. These articles often include details about family life and daily routines that seem innocent, but can provide valuable intelligence to someone planning an abduction. Do you remember what specific information was included about Emma or your family situation? Marcus recalled the article with increasing unease. The reporter had visited their home for the interview, taking photographs of Marcus working on an engine in his garage while Emma played nearby. The story had mentioned Emma's age, her school attendance, and even her weekly swimming lessons at the community center. Information that seemed harmless in the context of a human interest piece, but could provide a detailed roadmap for someone studying potential targets. We'll want to review that article and identify anyone who might have had access to it during the planning phase, Agent Chun continued. But first, let's look at what the surveillance cameras captured. Agent Chun opened her laptop and connected it to a portable monitor that transformed Detective Coleman's desk into a digital command center. The first footage came from the corner market's aging security system, showing a grainy black and white view of Oak Street during the relevant time period. The image quality was poor, but movement was clearly visible as vehicles passed through the camera's field of view. At 2:58 p.m., a dark blue van appeared at the edge of the frame, moving slowly along Oak Street before stopping at a position that would provide clear visibility of the intersection where Emma would later disappear. The van remained stationary for approximately 7 minutes, during which no one entered or exited the vehicle. At 3:06 p.m., the van departed the area, accelerating rapidly before disappearing from the camera's range. "The timing is perfect," Detective Coleman observed, his voice carrying grim satisfaction at having confirmed their theory. The van arrives just before Emma would be expected to reach the intersection, waits in position during the window when she would be most vulnerable, then leaves immediately after the abduction. Marcus studied the footage with professional detachment, forcing himself to analyze the tactical elements rather than the emotional implications. The van's positioning demonstrated advanced knowledge of Emma's route and timing. The duration surveillance suggested confidence that the operation could be completed within a specific window. The rapid departure indicated preparation for immediate escape rather than extended presence in the area. "Can you enhance the image enough to get a license plate or identify the driver?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer would be disappointing. Agent Chun manipulated the digital controls, zooming in on different sections of the footage and applying various enhancement filters. The license plate remained too blurry to read, and the van's windows were tinted dark enough to obscure any view of the interior. But the enhancement revealed other details that could prove significant. A small dent in the van's rear bumper, a distinctive antenna configuration, and what appeared to be commercial lettering on the side panel that had been partially covered or removed. "The commercial lettering is interesting," Agent Chen said, pausing the footage at the clearest view of the van's side panel. "It looks like this vehicle was originally used for business purposes, probably a delivery or service company. Someone has tried to remove or cover the lettering, but you can still see the outline of what might have been a company logo." Marcus leaned forward to study the enhanced image more carefully. The outline of the covered lettering suggested text that was approximately 8 to 10 characters in length, positioned below what might have been a simplified graphic logo. The modification appeared to be recent, based on the different coloration of the paint and the incomplete coverage of the original markings. "This gives us a search parameter," Detective Coleman said, reaching for his phone to coordinate with. The patrol unit's still canvassing the area. "We're looking for a dark blue van, probably mid-2010s model year, with evidence of recently removed commercial lettering and a dent in the rear bumper." Agent Chun switched to the traffic camera footage, which provided a different angle and significantly better image quality. The camera was positioned to monitor traffic violations at the main intersection, but its field of view included a portion of Oak Street where the van would have traveled during its approach and departure. The enhanced footage revealed additional details that hadn't been visible in the Market's security recording. The van was a Ford Transit, approximately 2012 to 2015 model year, based on the body style and headlight configuration. The driver appeared to be a single male, though the distance and angle made it impossible to determine specific physical characteristics. Most significantly, the van's license plate was clearly visible during a brief moment when the vehicle passed directly beneath a streetlight. Agent Chun enhanced and isolated the license plate image, revealing a Colorado registration with partial letters and numbers that could be determined with reasonable confidence. The combination of state registration and partial plate information would be sufficient to generate a manageable list of potential matches from the motor vehicle database. "Colorado plates," Marcus said, the information triggering a connection he hadn't previously considered. "Emma's aunt lives in Colorado. She and Emma video chat every Sunday afternoon. Could that be relevant?" Agent Chun and Detective Coleman exchanged glances that suggested the information was potentially significant. Family connections, even distant ones, often provided the personal information that enabled targeted crimes. Someone with access to Emma's regular video chats might have learned details about her routine, her relationship with Marcus, or other information that could facilitate an abduction plan. "We'll definitely want to interview Emma's aunt and review any recent communications," Detective Coleman said. "But let's see what else the surveillance footage can tell us." The community center security system provided the most detailed footage, capturing the van's approach along the backstreet route that would have allowed the driver to avoid most traffic cameras while maintaining easy access to the abduction site. The higher resolution cameras revealed additional details that painted a clearer picture of the perpetrator's planning and capabilities. The van had approached the area along a route that demonstrated detailed knowledge of local traffic patterns and camera locations. The driver had used side streets and residential roads to reach the intersection, avoiding the main thoroughfares where commercial and municipal surveillance systems would have provided clear documentation of the vehicle's movement. The route planning suggested either extensive local knowledge or careful advance reconnaissance. More disturbing was the evidence of preparation visible in the enhanced footage. The van's interior had been modified with what appeared to be restraint systems and sound-dampening materials. Tinted windows prevented clear visibility into the cargo area, but subtle shadows and reflections revealed the presence of equipment that was clearly not standard for a commercial delivery vehicle. "This isn't someone who decided to grab a random child," Agent Chun said, her voice carrying the weight of professional experience with similar cases. "This is someone who planned extensively, prepared specifically for abduction, and targeted Emma based on detailed knowledge of her routine and family situation." Marcus felt something cold and focus settling into his chest as he processed the implications. Emma hadn't been the victim of a crime of opportunity or a random predator. She had been specifically targeted by someone who had studied her life, learned her patterns, and developed a sophisticated plan for her abduction. The level of preparation suggested resources, intelligence, and capabilities that made the perpetrator extremely dangerous. But the evidence also revealed potential vulnerabilities in the perpetrator's operational security. The use of a distinctive vehicle with traceable registration The choice to operate in an area with multiple surveillance systems. The modification of the van in ways that would be memorable to anyone who had seen it recently. These were mistakes that could provide the investigative leads necessary to track down Emma's location. Agent Chun's phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a priority communication, and she answered with the brisk efficiency of someone accustomed to urgent developments. The conversation was brief but clearly significant, based on the changes in her expression and the rapid notes she began taking. The Colorado DMV has identified 12 Ford Transit vans matching our description and partial license plate information, Agent Chun reported after ending the call. 3 of them are registered to individuals with criminal records involving crimes against children. 1 is registered to a company that was dissolved 6 months ago under suspicious circumstances. The remaining 8 appear to be legitimate commercial or personal registrations. Detective Coleman was already coordinating with Colorado law enforcement to begin immediate surveillance and investigation of the high-priority targets. The dissolved company registration was particularly interesting, since it suggested someone who had maintained access to a commercial vehicle, while eliminating the paper trail that would normally accompany business ownership. The company was called Rocky Mountain Delivery Services. Agent Chun continued, reading from her notes. It was dissolved following an investigation into illegal firearms trafficking. The owner, David Mitchell, was arrested but never prosecuted due to insufficient evidence. The van registration was never transferred after the company dissolution. Marcus absorbed this information with the systematic attention of someone processing intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. David Mitchell represented their first concrete lead, a person with both the means and the apparent motivation to engage in serious criminal activity. The combination of firearms trafficking and child abduction suggested someone operating at a high level of criminal sophistication. What do we know about Mitchell's background and current location? Marcus asked, his voice carrying the controlled intensity that had once preceded combat operations. Agent Chun consulted her digital files, pulling up information that had been transmitted from the FBI's Colorado field office. David Mitchell was 43 years old, a former military contractor with experience in logistics and transportation. He had been discharged from the Army under other than honorable conditions 12 years ago, following allegations of misconduct that had never been fully prosecuted. His recent address was a rural property outside Denver, but surveillance conducted 3 hours ago had found the property abandoned. The military contractor background sent alarm signals through Marcus's consciousness. Someone with logistics experience would understand transportation routes, surveillance avoidance, and operational planning at a level that made them extremely dangerous. The combination of criminal motivation and professional capabilities suggested that Emma's abduction was part of a larger plan that extended beyond simple kidnapping. Mitchell's military record shows specialized training in reconnaissance and asset recovery. Agent Chun continued. He served 2 deployments in Iraq as a civilian contractor, working with units that conducted high-value target operations. After his discharge, he worked for several private security companies before starting the delivery business that was later investigated for illegal activities. Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he processed Mitchell's background. Asset recovery operations were essentially kidnapping missions conducted by military and intelligence units against high-value targets. Someone with that training would understand how to plan and execute an abduction with minimal risk of detection or pursuit. More disturbing, they would also understand how to interrogate captives and how to eliminate evidence when operations were completed. We need to assume that Mitchell has taken Emma to a secure location where he can control access and eliminate the risk of rescue attempts, Marcus said, his military training asserting itself over his parental emotions. Someone with his background will have prepared multiple contingency plans and will be expecting pursuit. Detective Coleman nodded grimly. The FBI is coordinating with state and federal agencies across the region to identify properties that Mitchell might have access to. Abandoned warehouses, rural compounds, storage facilities, anywhere that would provide the isolation and security he would need for an extended operation. Agent Chun's laptop chimed with an incoming priority message, and she opened the communication with the rapid keystrokes of someone accustomed to processing urgent intelligence. The message appeared to contain photographic attachments and detailed text that caused her expression to shift toward something approaching alarm. "We have a potential sighting," Agent Chun announced, turning the laptop screen so that Marcus and Detective Coleman could see the attached photographs. "A Colorado State Patrol officer spotted a van matching our description at a rest stop approximately 4 hours ago. The timing and location are consistent with someone traveling from this area toward the Denver region." The photograph showed a dark blue Ford Transit parked in the rest area, with clear views of the license plate that matched their target registration. More significantly, the images showed a male figure whose physical description was consistent with David Mitchell's known characteristics. The photographs had been taken from a distance using telephoto equipment, but the image quality was sufficient to confirm that the van contained at least one occupant. The officer was conducting routine patrol and recognized the vehicle description from the alert we issued. Agent Chun continued. He maintained surveillance without approaching the van, but he was able to confirm that it remained at the rest stop for approximately 20 minutes before departing westbound on Interstate 70. Marcus studied the photographs with professional attention, noting details that revealed important information about the perpetrator's operational status and capabilities. The van appeared to be traveling at a measured pace rather than fleeing rapidly, suggesting confidence in the operation's security. The stop at a public rest area indicated either overconfidence or operational necessity, possibly for refueling or communication. Most importantly, the photographs confirmed that Emma's abduction was part of a larger plan that involved transportation to a distant location. Mitchell wasn't planning to remain in the local area where immediate search efforts would be most effective. He was moving Emma to a location where he would have complete control over the tactical situation. Interstate 70 westbound leads directly into the mountain regions where Mitchell would have the best opportunities for secure facilities, Detective Coleman observed. Remote areas with limited law enforcement presence, private properties that can't be easily surveilled, terrain that would make rescue operations extremely difficult. Marcus felt his military training engaging more fully as he processed the tactical implications. Mountain operations presented unique challenges that required specialized equipment and expertise. Limited access routes that could be easily defended or monitored. Weather conditions that could ground air support and complicate ground movement. Communication difficulties that would hamper coordination between rescue units. But mountains also presented vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with the right training and preparation. Predictable choke points where vehicles had to travel along established routes. Limited options for resupply and logistic support. Weather patterns that could provide concealment for approach and reconnaissance operations. "I need to get to Colorado," Marcus said, the decision crystallizing with absolute clarity. "Mitchell has Emma in terrain that I understand better than most law enforcement personnel. If you're going to mount a rescue operation, you'll need someone with mountain warfare experience." Agent Chun and Detective Coleman exchanged glances that suggested they had anticipated this request and had already discussed their response. "Mr. Thompson, I understand your desire to be involved in Emma's rescue, but this is now a federal operation involving multiple agencies and specialized units. The FBI has tactical teams with extensive experience in hostage recovery and high-risk operations." Marcus appreciated their professionalism, but he also understood the limitations of even the most capable federal tactical units. Standard hostage rescue operations were designed for urban environments with predictable access routes and communication capabilities. Mountain operations require different skills, different equipment, and different tactical approaches that were outside the normal scope of federal law enforcement training. With respect, Agent Chun, I've conducted operations in terrain that makes the Colorado mountains look like a playground, Marcus replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to make such claims. Mitchell has training and experience, but so do I, and I have something he doesn't have: absolute motivation to bring Emma home safely. Detective Coleman leaned forward, his expression suggesting that he understood Marcus's capabilities in ways that Agent Chun might not fully appreciate. What specific skills do you bring that the FBI tactical teams don't have? Marcus considered the question carefully, knowing that his answer would determine whether he would be included in the rescue operation or relegated to waiting helplessly while others attempted to save his daughter. High-altitude operations, winter warfare, reconnaissance in mountainous terrain, small unit tactics in areas with limited communication and logistic support. I've conducted successful rescue operations under conditions that would challenge even the most elite federal units. More importantly, though he didn't say it aloud, Marcus brought the willingness to take risks and make sacrifices that no federal agent could match. Professional rescue operators had to balance mission success against personal safety and departmental liability. A father rescuing his own child operated under different constraints entirely. Agent Chun consulted her laptop, apparently reviewing information about Marcus's military service record that had been transmitted from military databases. Her expression shifted as she processed details about his specialized training in combat, experience that hadn't been included in the initial missing child report. Your service record shows 3 deployments conducting special operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, Agent Chun said, her voice carrying new respect for Marcus's capabilities, including high-value target recovery missions in mountainous terrain. You're trained in tactical medicine, advanced reconnaissance, and small unit operations. Marcus nodded, noting that Agent Chun was now viewing him as a potential asset rather than simply an emotional family member who needed to be managed. I'm also motivated in ways that no professional operator can match. Mitchell is counting on law enforcement following predictable protocols and operational procedures. He's not expecting to face someone who will do whatever it takes to get Emma back. Detective Coleman's phone rang with another priority communication, and the brief conversation that followed seemed to shift the entire dynamic of their discussion. When he ended the call, his expression carried news that would change the direction of their investigation. That was the Colorado FBI field office, Detective Coleman announced. They've identified a property in the mountains west of Denver that Mitchell has been using as a base of operations. It's a former mining facility that he purchased through a shell company 6 months ago. Satellite imagery shows recent activity and modifications that are consistent with preparations for a secure facility. Marcus felt adrenaline beginning to flow through his system as the situation shifted from investigation to operational planning. A known location meant that reconnaissance and assault planning could begin immediately. More importantly, it meant that Emma's rescue had moved from possibility to probability, assuming the tactical approach was executed correctly. The facility is located in terrain that presents significant challenges for conventional assault operations, Detective Coleman continued. Single access road that can be easily monitored or defended. Elevated position that provides visibility over the surrounding area. Multiple structures that could be used for defensive positions or to conceal hostages. Agent Chun was already coordinating with the FBI's tactical response team, but Marcus could see from her expression that the operational challenges were more complex than standard hostage rescue procedures could easily address. The combination of difficult terrain, prepared defensive positions, and a perpetrator with professional training created a tactical situation that required unconventional approaches. The FBI tactical team is coordinating with local law enforcement and the Colorado National Guard, Agent Chun reported. But they're estimating at least 12 hours for full operational preparation, plus additional time for reconnaissance and tactical planning. Marcus felt something cold and urgent forming in his chest as he processed the timeline. 12 hours for preparation, plus additional time for reconnaissance and planning, could easily extend to 24 hours or more before any rescue attempt began. Emma had already been missing for more than 9 hours. Extended captivity in the hands of someone with Mitchell's background presented risks that increased exponentially with time. Agent Chun, with respect, "I can be in Colorado in 6 hours," Marcus said, his voice carrying the controlled intensity of someone transitioning from civilian to operational mode. "I can conduct reconnaissance and provide tactical intelligence. That will save time in your operational planning. More importantly, I can identify opportunities and vulnerabilities that your tactical teams might not recognize." Agent Chun consulted with someone via her secure communication device, a conversation that lasted several minutes and involved detailed discussion of Marcus's military background and potential contribution to the rescue operation. When she ended the call, her expression suggested that federal decision-makers were reconsidering their initial reluctance to involve civilian assets. "The special agent in charge has authorized your participation in the reconnaissance phase," Agent Chun announced. "You'll be attached to the advance team as a subject matter expert on mountain operations and tactical planning. But Mr. Thompson, you need to understand that this remains a federal operation under FBI command and control." Marcus nodded his acceptance of the operational constraints, though he privately reserved the right to take independent action if federal procedures threatened Emma's safety. "I understand the command structure. When do we leave for Colorado?" Agent Chun checked her watch and began coordinating transportation arrangements. "There's a federal flight departing from the regional airport in 2 hours. That puts us on the ground in Denver before dawn, with full daylight for reconnaissance and tactical planning." Marcus felt his military training asserting itself fully as he shifted from desperate father to operational asset. Emma was being held in a secure facility by a professional with dangerous capabilities, but she was also about to be rescued by someone with the skills, experience, and absolute determination to bring her home safely. The hunt was entering its final phase. Mitchell had chosen his ground and prepared his defenses, but he had made one critical error in his planning. He had assumed that law enforcement would respond with predictable tactics and conventional procedures. He hadn't anticipated facing a father whose love for his daughter was matched only by his ability to wage war in the mountains where Mitchell thought he was safe. Dawn was still hours away, but Marcus Thompson was already preparing for the most important mission of his life. Emma was waiting for him somewhere in the Colorado mountains, and nothing, not terrain, not weather, not a prepared enemy would prevent him from bringing her home. The aircraft engines were warming up, the tactical gear was being loaded, and in less than 6 hours, the rescue operation would begin. Mitchell had Emma, but he was about to discover what happened when someone threatened the most important thing in a ranger's world. Emma was coming home. Whatever it took, whatever risks had to be accepted, whatever prices had to be paid. Emma was coming home. The darkness swallowed Marcus as he descended through the ventilation shaft, his headlamp creating a narrow cone of light that revealed the rough-hewn walls of the vertical passage. The rope sang softly through his rappelling device as he controlled his descent, each foot bringing him deeper into the mountain's belly where his daughter waited in the hands of a dangerous man. The shaft walls showed the crude tool marks of miners from decades past, men who had carved this passage without knowing it would one day serve as a lifeline between a father and his child. Dr. Walsh followed 20 feet above him, her own descent, smooth and professional despite the challenging conditions. The acoustic properties of the shaft made communication difficult. Every sound echoed and distorted, creating the possibility that their approach might be detected by anyone listening carefully from below. Marcus had trained in similar environments during his military service, but the emotional weight of this particular mission added layers of pressure that no amount of professional experience could fully prepare him for. The shaft extended deeper than the geological surveys had indicated, and Marcus's altimeter showed they had descended nearly 60 feet before the vertical passage began to angle toward horizontal. The transition zone was the most dangerous part of the insertion, requiring careful navigation to avoid dislodging rocks or creating noise that might alert Mitchell to their presence. Marcus moved with the methodical precision of someone whose life had often depended on silent movement through hostile territory. The horizontal tunnel that connected to the shaft was larger than Marcus had expected, wide enough for 2 people to move side by side and tall enough to stand upright without difficulty. The floor was covered with decades of accumulated debris and mineral deposits, but the passage appeared structurally sound and extended beyond the range of his headlamp in both directions. More importantly, there were no immediate signs of security, modifications or defensive preparations that would indicate Mitchell's awareness of this access point. Marcus secured the rope system and established a small equipment cache at the bottom of the shaft, creating a rally point where Dr. Walsh could prepare her medical gear while he conducted initial reconnaissance of the tunnel system. The communications equipment that would maintain contact with the surface team required careful positioning to ensure signal strength through 60 feet of rock and earth. "Phoenix Base, this is Rescue 1, Marcus whispered into his throat microphone, using the call signs that Agent Rodriguez had established for the operation. "We have successfully inserted into the tunnel system. Beginning reconnaissance of target area." Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled through the encrypted radio system, distorted by the underground environment, but clear enough to confirm communication protocols. "Rescue 1, Phoenix Base copies. Primary team is in position and prepared to initiate diversionary action on your command. Surface team confirms no change in target activity patterns." Marcus felt a surge of professional satisfaction at the confirmation that their insertion had been undetected. Mitchell was maintaining his defensive positions at the main facility entrance, apparently unaware that rescue operators were now moving through the tunnel system beneath his position. The element of surprise was intact, providing the tactical advantage that would be essential for Emma's safe recovery. Dr. Walsh completed her equipment preparation and joined Marcus at the point where the tunnel split into 2 passages that led deeper into the mountain. The choice of direction would determine how quickly they could locate Emma and whether they could maintain the element of surprise during the rescue attempt. "Which direction?" Dr. Walsh asked, her voice barely audible despite their proximity. Marcus consulted the mine survey diagrams that had been provided by the Geological Service, correlating the tunnel layout with the surface features they had observed during reconnaissance. The right passage appeared to lead toward the main mine workings, where heavy equipment would have been operated during active mining. The left passage angled toward the surface facility where Mitchell had established his operational headquarters. "Left passage takes us toward the surface buildings," Marcus said, making tactical calculations based on the intelligence they had gathered about Mitchell's operational patterns. If Mitchell is holding Emma in the underground sections, he'll want her close enough to the surface that he can maintain control while monitoring his defensive positions. The decision made tactical sense, but it also meant they would be moving toward the area where Mitchell was most likely to have prepared defensive measures and security protocols. The closer they moved to his operational center, the greater the risk of detection and the more dangerous the tactical situation would become if their presence was discovered. Marcus took point as they began moving through the left tunnel, using hand signals and whispered communications to coordinate their advance through the underground passage. The tunnel showed evidence of recent use footprints in the accumulated debris, sections where the walls had been cleared of loose rock, and, most significantly, electrical cables that had been run along the ceiling to provide power to Mitchell's surface facility. The electrical installation revealed important intelligence about Mitchell's operational capabilities and security preparations. The cables were military specification, suggesting access to professional-grade equipment and installation expertise. More concerning, the cables included what appeared to be communication lines that could support surveillance systems or remote detonation devices throughout the tunnel system. "Mitchell has extensive electrical infrastructure down here," Marcus reported to Dr. Walsh, indicating the cable runs that extended beyond their current position. "Communications, power distribution, possibly security systems. He's prepared this facility for extended operations." Dr. Walsh examined the cable installation with professional interest, noting details that revealed additional information about Mitchell's capabilities and intentions. The power requirements suggest significant electrical loads, lighting, ventilation, possibly refrigeration for extended food storage. This isn't a temporary facility. He's prepared for long-term occupation. The implications were both encouraging and terrifying. Mitchell had invested substantial resources in creating a secure facility that could support extended operations, suggesting that he intended to keep Emma alive for whatever purpose had motivated the abduction. But the same preparations that might ensure Emma's survival also made rescue operations exponentially more difficult and dangerous. Marcus and Dr. Walsh continued their advance through the tunnel system, noting features and obstacles that would affect both their current mission and any subsequent operations that might be necessary. The tunnel curved gradually as it approached the surface facility, following the natural geology of the mountain while maintaining structural integrity through sections where the rock formations were less stable. After 30 minutes of careful movement, they encountered the first indication that they were approaching Mitchell's operational area. A steel door had been installed across the tunnel, secured with multiple locks and what appeared to be electronic monitoring equipment. Beyond the door, artificial lighting was visible through gaps in the frame, suggesting active occupation of the areas beyond. Marcus examined the door and its security systems with the methodical attention of someone who had encountered similar barriers during combat operations. The locks were professional-grade devices that would require specialized tools or explosive charges to breach. The electronic monitoring system included motion sensors and vibration detectors that would alert Mitchell to any attempt to force entry through the barrier. But the door installation also revealed a critical vulnerability in Mitchell's security. Preparations. The tunnel ceiling above the door showed stress fractures where the installation had disturbed the natural rock formations. The fractures extended several feet on both sides of the door, creating the possibility that alternative access routes could be created through controlled demolition of the ceiling section. The door is heavily secured, but the installation has created structural weaknesses in the ceiling, Marcus whispered to Dr. Walsh, indicating the stress fractures that could be exploited. Small charges placed correctly could create an access route that bypasses the door entirely. Dr. Walsh examined the ceiling fractures and nodded her understanding of the tactical opportunity. Her combat experience in Iraq had included operations where entry points were created through controlled demolition of structural barriers. Shaped charges would be ideal, but we could achieve the same result with improvised explosive devices, if necessary. Marcus appreciated Dr. Walsh's professional competence, but he also understood that explosive breaching operations in underground environments presented unique risks and challenges. The confined space would amplify blast effects, potentially causing injury to the operators or structural collapse that could trap them in the tunnel system. More critically, any explosive breach would immediately alert Mitchell to their presence, eliminating the element of surprise that was essential for Emma's safety. Explosive breaching is our fallback option, Marcus decided, continuing his examination of the barrier and its surrounding environment. But let's see if we can find an alternative approach that maintains operational security. The tunnel system beyond the steel door appeared to extend further into the mountain, based on the airflow patterns and acoustic properties that Marcus could detect. More importantly, the artificial lighting visible through the door gaps suggested active occupation of areas that could include Emma's holding location. They were close to their objective, but the final approach would require careful tactical planning and precise execution. Marcus established a communications check with the surface team, confirming that the primary tactical unit remained in position and that Mitchell continued to focus his attention on the main facility entrance. The diversionary assault had not yet been initiated, preserving the option to create a distraction that would draw Mitchell's attention away from the underground areas during the rescue attempt. Phoenix Base, Rescue 1 requesting intelligence. Update on target activity, Marcus whispered into his throat microphone. We have reached the primary security barrier and are preparing for final approach to probable hostage location. Agent Rodriguez's response carried information that would affect their tactical planning for the rescue attempt. Rescue 1. Thermal imaging shows 2 heat signatures in the surface facility, but we're unable to determine location or activity patterns due to structural interference. Electronic monitoring suggests continued radio silence from target. Number. Indication of awareness regarding your approach. The intelligence confirmation was encouraging, but Marcus understood that Mitchell's professional training would make him difficult to surprise even under optimal conditions. Someone with his background would maintain constant situational awareness and would have prepared contingency plans for multiple scenarios, including underground infiltration attempts. Dr. Walsh completed her examination of the steel door and its security systems, reaching conclusions that aligned with Marcus's assessment of their tactical options. The electronic monitoring system is sophisticated, but not military grade. We could probably defeat it with the right equipment and sufficient time. But any attempt to breach the door will trigger immediate alarm conditions. Marcus weighed their options against the operational constraints that governed the rescue mission. Time was becoming a critical factor. The longer they remained in the tunnel system, the greater the risk that Mitchell would detect their presence or that changing conditions might compromise Emma's safety. The element of surprise was there. Primary tactical advantage, but it was also a diminishing asset that required immediate exploitation. We'll bypass the door using the ceiling fractures, Marcus decided, beginning to prepare the demolition materials they had brought for exactly this contingency. Small charges precisely placed, minimum blast signature. Dr. Walsh, prepare for immediate medical assessment of the hostage once we gain access. The shaped charges that Marcus carried were designed for exactly this type of precise demolition. Work, military specification devices that could create controlled openings through rock and concrete, while minimizing collateral damage and blast signature. The charges required careful placement and timing to achieve the desired effect, without causing structural collapse or excessive noise that would alert Mitchell. Marcus positioned the charges in the ceiling fractures that offered the best combination of structural weakness and tactical access to the areas beyond the steel door. The blast pattern would create an opening large enough for both operators to pass through quickly, while leaving the tunnel structure intact for emergency egress if the operation required rapid withdrawal. Charges placed and armed, Marcus reported to Dr. Walsh, who had moved to a safe distance while preparing her medical equipment for immediate deployment. Detonation in 30 seconds. Prepare for immediate advance to hostage location. The explosion was smaller than Marcus had expected, more of a sharp crack than a traditional blast, but the effect was exactly what the tactical situation required. The ceiling section collapsed in a controlled manner, creating an opening that provided access to the areas beyond the steel door, while generating minimal noise signature that might alert Mitchell to their presence. Marcus was through the opening before the dust had settled, his weapon ready and his senses hyper-alert for any indication of hostile activity in the chamber beyond. Walsh followed immediately behind him, her medical bag prepared for whatever condition they might find Emma in when they located her. The chamber beyond the security door was larger than the tunnel system they had navigated, clearly a natural cave formation that Mitchell had converted into an operational facility. Artificial lighting illuminated work areas where communications equipment and supply storage had been established. More importantly, the chamber connected to additional passages that extended deeper into the mountain where hostages could be held in complete isolation. Marcus moved through the chamber with systematic precision, clearing each area before advancing to the next while maintaining visual contact with Dr. Walsh and communication with the surface team. The facility showed evidence of extensive preparation and professional operational planning, confirming their intelligence assessments about Mitchell's capabilities and intentions. Electronic equipment throughout the chamber suggested sophisticated communications and monitoring capabilities that would allow Mitchell to coordinate defensive operations while maintaining awareness of activities throughout his facility. Computer workstations displayed real-time feeds from security cameras positioned throughout the surface facility, but no monitors showed views of the underground areas where Emma was likely being held. Multiple security stations and communication equipment, Marcus reported to Dr. Walsh as they completed their clearance of the main chamber. Mitchell has extensive situational awareness capabilities for the surface facility, but the underground areas appear to be monitored separately. Dr. Walsh examined the computer workstations while Marcus secured the chamber perimeter, noting details that revealed additional information about Mitchell's operational plans and capabilities. Communications logs show scheduled transmissions to external contacts, but the content is encrypted. Food supplies and medical equipment suggest preparation for extended operations involving multiple persons. The evidence that Mitchell had prepared for extended operations involving multiple persons was both encouraging and alarming. The medical supplies suggested that he intended to keep Emma alive and in reasonable health, but the duration of his preparations indicated that he was planning for a prolonged hostage situation that could extend for weeks or months. Marcus identified 3 passages that led from the main chamber deeper into the cave system where Emma was most likely being held. Each passage presented different tactical challenges and required different approaches for safe clearance and hostage location. The choice of route would determine how quickly they could locate Emma and whether they could maintain the element of surprise during the rescue attempt. The first passage angled downward into natural cave formations that would provide excellent acoustic security for hostage operations, but would also create challenges for communication with the surface team. The second passage led toward what appeared to be artificial excavations that could house specialized facilities for extended hostage detention. The third passage curved back toward the surface in a direction that would place it beneath Mitchell's primary defensive positions. Which direction? Dr. Walsh asked, echoing the same tactical decision they had faced at the tunnel junction. Marcus listened carefully to the acoustic properties of each passage, searching for any sounds that might indicate human presence or activity in the areas beyond. The underground environment created complex acoustic patterns that could carry sounds over considerable distances while also distorting them in ways that made precise location difficult. From the second passage, the one that led toward the artificial excavations, Marcus detected what might have been human voices or movement. The sounds were too faint and distorted to identify specifically, but they suggested activity in areas that could house hostage detention facilities. Second passage, Marcus decided, beginning his advance toward the artificial excavations where Emma was most likely being held. Stay close, maintain visual contact, and be prepared for immediate medical intervention. The second passage led them through a series of interconnected chambers that showed clear evidence of recent construction and modification. Fresh concrete had been poured to create level floors. Electrical systems had been installed to provide lighting and power distribution. Most significantly, steel doors had been installed at regular intervals, creating individual chambers that could serve as detention cells. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as they approached the detention area where Emma was most likely being held. The tactical situation was becoming more dangerous with each step. They were approaching the location where Mitchell would have concentrated his security measures and where any confrontation would pose maximum risk to Emma's safety. The first detention cell was empty, but showed evidence of recent preparation for occupancy. Bedding materials, food supplies, and basic sanitation facilities had been installed, confirming that Mitchell had prepared multiple holding areas for extended hostage operations. The professional quality of the preparations suggested experience. With similar operations and access to resources that extended beyond typical criminal capabilities, the second detention cell contained sounds that Marcus immediately recognized as human movement and breathing. Someone was being held in the chamber beyond the steel door, and the acoustic pattern suggested a person of small stature who was awake and possibly attempting to communicate. "Emma?" Marcus called softly through the steel door, his voice barely audible but carrying the desperate hope of a father who had traveled across the country and descended into the earth to find his daughter. The response was immediate and unmistakable, Emma's voice calling "Daddy," with a mixture of hope and disbelief that told Marcus everything he needed to know about her condition and her desperate wish for rescue. "Emma, it's Daddy," Marcus confirmed, his voice stronger now as he began examining the door's locking mechanisms. "I'm here to take you home, sweetheart. Stay calm and stay away from the door." Dr. Walsh moved into position to provide security while Marcus worked on the door locks, her weapon ready, and her medical equipment prepared for immediate deployment. The locks were substantial but not sophisticated, designed to contain rather than defend, suggesting that Mitchell had focused his security preparations on perimeter defense rather than internal detention security. Marcus had the door open within 3 minutes, revealing Emma huddled in the corner of the small chamber, but apparently uninjured and in good condition. She ran into his arms with the explosive energy of a 7-year-old who had been waiting for her father to keep his promise that he would always protect her. "Daddy, I knew you would come," Emma said, her voice muffled against Marcus's tactical vest as she held onto him with desperate intensity. "The bad man said you couldn't find me, but I knew you would come." Marcus held his daughter for precious seconds, allowing himself to feel the overwhelming relief of successful mission completion, while Dr. Walsh conducted a rapid medical assessment to ensure Emma hadn't been injured during her captivity. But his tactical training reminded him that the rescue operation was only half complete. They still needed to extract Emma safely from Mitchell's facility and return her to the surface where federal agents could provide security and medical support. "Emma, we need to leave very quietly," Marcus explained, helping his daughter understand the tactical situation without frightening her more than necessary. "The bad man doesn't know we're here, and we want to keep it that way until we get you back to the surface." Dr. Walsh confirmed that Emma appeared to be in good physical condition despite her ordeal, showing no signs of injury or medical distress that would complicate the extraction operation. "She's dehydrated and probably hasn't eaten much, but she's stable for movement. We should get her to the surface for complete medical evaluation." Marcus equipped Emma with a small headlamp and basic protective gear that would allow her to navigate the tunnel system safely during their extraction movement. The return journey would be more challenging than their infiltration approach, since they would be moving with a 7-year-old who lacked the technical climbing skills necessary for rope work in the vertical shaft. "Phoenix Base, Rescue 1, Marcus reported to the surface team as they prepared to begin their extraction movement. "Package secured and in good condition. Beginning extraction to surface position. Request medical team standing by for assessment and treatment." Agent Rodriguez's response carried the professional satisfaction of a successful federal operation, combined with genuine relief that Emma had been found alive and apparently uninjured. Rescue 1. Phoenix Base copies package recovery. Medical. Team standing by. Primary team maintaining overwatch position. Be advised target remains in defensive positions at surface facility. The extraction route that Marcus planned would take them back through the chamber where Mitchell's communications. Equipment was located, then through the tunnel system to the vertical shaft where rope systems would lift Emma to the surface. The route was longer than direct alternatives, but it avoided areas where Mitchell was most likely to maintain security monitoring or where tactical complications might endanger Emma's safety. Marcus took point during the extraction movement, with Emma staying close behind him and Dr. Walsh providing rear security as they navigated back through the underground facility toward their extraction point. The movement was slower than their infiltration approach, but Emma proved to be remarkably calm and cooperative, despite the frightening circumstances of her rescue. They had reached the main chamber with its communications equipment when Marcus detected sounds that indicated they were no longer alone in the underground facility. Footsteps echoed from the direction of the surface facility, suggesting that Mitchell had become aware of the security breach and was moving to investigate. The detention areas. Marcus immediately shifted into defensive mode, positioning Emma and Dr. Walsh in covered positions while he prepared to deal with the tactical threat that Mitchell's approach represented. The underground environment favored defensive operations, but it also limited options for movement and maneuver if the situation escalated to direct confrontation. "Stay down and stay quiet," Marcus whispered to Emma, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat situations. "Daddy needs to talk to the bad man, but everything is going to be okay." Mitchell's voice echoed through the chamber before he came into view, confirming that he was aware of the security breach and was approaching their position with tactical awareness of the underground environment. "I know you're in here," Mitchell called, his voice carrying professional calm despite the tactical situation, "and I know you have the child." Marcus positioned himself where he could engage Mitchell while maintaining security for Emma and Dr. Walsh, his weapon ready, but his tactical approach focused on negotiation rather than immediate confrontation. Emma's safety required avoiding any exchange of gunfire in the confined underground environment where ricochets and structural damage could pose additional threats. "Mitchell, this is Marcus Thompson," Marcus called, identifying himself to establish the personal nature of the confrontation. "You have something that belongs to me, and I'm here to take her home." Mitchell appeared at the entrance to the main chamber, his own weapon ready, but not immediately threatening as he assessed the tactical situation and his options for maintaining control over the hostage scenario. He was exactly what Marcus had expected: professional, calm, and dangerous in ways that extended beyond simple criminal capability. "Thompson, I was wondering when you'd show up," Mitchell said, his voice carrying a mixture of professional respect and tactical calculation. "You're better than I expected. Most fathers would have waited for the FBI to handle everything." Marcus appreciated Mitchell's acknowledgement of his tactical skills, but his focus remained entirely on Emma's safety and the need to conclude this confrontation without violence that could endanger his daughter. "It's over, Mitchell. Federal agents have your facility surrounded, and Emma is going home with me today. The only question is whether you want to surrender peacefully or make this difficult." Mitchell's response would determine whether the rescue operation concluded successfully or escalated into a tactical confrontation that could endanger everyone in the underground facility. Marcus was prepared for either possibility, but his primary objective remained unchanged. Emma was going home safely, whatever the cost. The underground chamber fell into tense silence as Marcus and Mitchell faced each other across the equipment-filled space, both men understanding that the next few moments would determine whether Emma walked out of this mountain alive. "Marcus," kept his weapon trained on Mitchell while positioning himself to shield Emma and Dr. Walsh from any potential crossfire. The tactical situation was delicately balanced. One wrong move could escalate into violence that would endanger everyone. In the confined underground environment, Mitchell studied Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone assessing an opponent's capabilities and intentions. His own weapon remained ready but not directly threatening, suggesting that he understood the tactical realities as clearly as Marcus did. In the underground facility's artificial lighting, Mitchell appeared older than his 43 years, his face weathered by stress and whatever psychological pressures had driven him to this desperate course of action. "You know, Thompson, I researched you pretty thoroughly before I took your daughter," Mitchell said, his voice carrying conversational calm that contrasted sharply with the life-or-death nature of their confrontation. 3 combat deployments. Decorated Ranger, expert in exactly the kind of operations that would be necessary to find me here. I was curious to see if you'd live up to your reputation. Marcus felt Emma pressing against his back, her small hands clutching at his tactical vest as she tried to understand the adult conversation that would determine her fate. Dr. Walsh maintained her defensive position, her medical bag ready and her weapon prepared for whatever developments might unfold in the next critical minutes. "My reputation isn't what matters here," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "What matters is that Emma goes home to her normal life, and you face the consequences of what you've done. This doesn't have to end with anyone getting hurt." Mitchell's laugh held no humor, only the bitter resignation of someone who had committed to a course of action that offered no acceptable outcomes. "Normal life? Thompson, you have no idea what you've stumbled into here. Taking your daughter wasn't random, it was business. And business isn't finished just because you managed to find her." The revelation that Emma's kidnapping was connected to some larger criminal enterprise sent cold fear through Marcus's chest. He had assumed that Mitchell's motivation was personal, possibly connected to Marcus's military service or some grudge against veterans. But business suggested organized crime, ongoing operations, and associates who might continue to threaten Emma even if this immediate situation was resolved. What kind of business requires kidnapping 7-year-old children? Marcus asked, probing for information that might help him understand the scope of the threat facing his family. Mitchell checked his watch with the casual gesture of someone monitoring a timeline that extended beyond their current confrontation. "The kind of business that your former unit interfered with in Afghanistan, Thompson. You and your Ranger buddies destroyed a very profitable supply line when you took down that compound outside Kandahar. Some people lost a lot of money, and they've been looking for appropriate compensation ever since." Marcus felt recognition dawning as Mitchell's words triggered memories of operations from his final deployment. The compound outside Kandahar had been a high-value target suspected of coordinating weapons trafficking and drug distribution throughout the region. The Rangers had conducted a successful raid that dismantled the operation and captured several key figures, but intelligence had suggested the network included international connections that extended far beyond Afghanistan. "You're talking about Hassan's network," Marcus said, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "The weapons trafficking operation that was funding insurgent activities throughout the region." Mitchell nodded with satisfaction at Marcus's recognition. "Very good. Hassan Al-Mahmoud had business relationships that extended from Afghanistan to Mexico to Colorado. When your unit destroyed his compound, you disrupted supply chains that had been profitable for a lot of people. People who don't forget debts or accept losses quietly." The implications were staggering. Emma's kidnapping wasn't an isolated crime, it was retaliation for military operations that Marcus had conducted years ago in a war zone thousands of miles away. The criminal network that Mitchell represented had apparently tracked down multiple veterans from Marcus's unit and was systematically targeting their families as payback for disrupting their operations. "How many others?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with the realization that other military families might be facing similar threats. Mitchell's expression suggested that Marcus had identified the correct scope of the problem. Your unit had 12 members when you hit Hassan's compound. Emma makes number 4. The others weren't as fortunate as your daughter. Their fathers weren't skilled enough to find them before the demonstrations became permanent. Marcus felt rage building in his chest at the implication that other children had been killed as part of this revenge operation against his former unit. But he forced himself to maintain tactical focus on the immediate situation. Emma was alive, she was within his reach, and his priority had to be getting her safely away from Mitchell and his criminal associates. Dr. Walsh shifted positions slightly, drawing Marcus's attention to her tactical assessment of their situation. She had been monitoring the tunnel entrances while Marcus engaged Mitchell in conversation, and her body language suggested that additional threats might be approaching their position. Movement in the eastern tunnel, Dr. Walsh whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying urgent warning about changing tactical conditions. Marcus processed this information while maintaining his focus on Mitchell, who seemed unsurprised by the development. The approaching movement suggested that Mitchell wasn't operating alone, despite the intelligence reports that had indicated single-person occupation of the facility. Additional personnel meant that the tactical situation was about to become significantly more complex and dangerous. My associate should be joining us shortly, Mitchell confirmed, his confidence increasing as the tactical balance shifted in his favor. Carlos has been monitoring your federal friends on the surface. Seems they're maintaining their positions like good law enforcement officers, waiting for backup and following protocols instead of taking decisive action. Marcus realized that Mitchell had been using their conversation to buy time for his associate to reach their position and establish tactical superiority. The criminal network's planning had included contingencies for rescue attempts, and Marcus had walked into a carefully prepared trap despite his professional training and tactical expertise. Carlos Mendoza, former Mexican Special Forces, Mitchell continued, apparently enjoying the opportunity to demonstrate his operational planning. He has experience with situations exactly like this one. Unlike your federal friends, Carlos understands that sometimes problems require permanent solutions. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the eastern tunnel, confirming that Marcus and Dr. Walsh were about to face multiple armed opponents in an underground environment that offered limited options for movement or tactical maneuver. Emma's safety would be impossible to guarantee if the situation escalated to sustained gunfire in the confined chamber. Marcus made rapid tactical calculations based on the changing situation and the need to protect Emma from crossfire or ricochet. Damage in the underground facility. The communications equipment in the chamber could provide cover and concealment, but it would also limit their mobility if they needed to move quickly toward the extraction route. Emma, I need you to stay exactly where you are and don't move until I tell you, Marcus whispered to his daughter, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat situations. Dr. Walsh is going to take care of you while Daddy handles the bad men. Emma nodded with the remarkable composure that she had maintained throughout her ordeal, trusting her father to manage whatever dangers threatened their safety. Her calm response provided Marcus with the emotional strength he needed to focus entirely on the tactical challenges of protecting her from multiple armed opponents. Carlos Mendoza appeared at the entrance to the eastern tunnel, his weapon ready and his movement suggesting professional military training that matched Marcus's own capabilities. He was a compact man in his 30s, his clothing and equipment indicating preparation for extended operations in difficult terrain. Most importantly, his tactical positioning revealed coordination with Mitchell that suggested extensive planning and rehearsal for exactly this scenario. Thompson, meet Carlos, Mitchell said with conversational politeness that contrasted sharply with the deadly nature of their confrontation. Carlos, this is the famous ranger who thinks he can walk into our facility and take back his daughter without consequences. Marcus assessed the tactical situation with professional detachment, noting positions, weapons, and potential advantages that could be exploited if the confrontation escalated to violence. He was outnumbered 2-1, operating in an environment that favored defensive positions and constrained by the absolute need to protect Emma from any stray gunfire or explosive damage. But Marcus also possessed advantages that Mitchell and Carlos might not have anticipated. His familiarity with underground operations exceeded theirs, based on his specialized training in tunnel and cave warfare. His motivation to protect Emma provided psychological strength that professional criminals couldn't match. Most importantly, he had backup in the form of Dr. Walsh, whose combat experience and tactical capabilities made her a formidable ally despite the numerical disadvantage. "The situation has changed," Thompson, Mitchell announced, apparently believing that the arrival of his associate had shifted the tactical balance decisively in his favor. "Carlos and I are going to walk out of here with your daughter, and you're going to stay behind to think about the consequences of interfering with business operations." Marcus felt the familiar calm that had always preceded combat operations. His training asserting itself as emotional responses gave way to tactical calculation and professional execution. Emma's safety required precise action rather than negotiation, and the time for talking had clearly passed. "Dr. Walsh, medical emergency," Marcus said quietly, using code words they had established to coordinate tactical action without alerting their opponents to their intentions. Dr. Walsh understood immediately, her own training engaging as she prepared to provide covering fire while Marcus moved to neutralize the threats facing Emma's safety. The chamber's layout provided opportunities for flanking movement, if they could coordinate their actions precisely and execute their plan before Mitchell and Carlos could respond effectively. Marcus moved with explosive speed, using the communications equipment as cover while advancing toward Carlos's position at the tunnel entrance. His years of close-quarters combat training had taught him that speed and aggression often provided decisive advantages in confined spaces where traditional tactics were limited by environmental constraints. Dr. Walsh engaged Mitchell simultaneously, her weapon fire forcing him to seek cover behind the computer workstations, while Marcus closed with Carlos in a series of movements that demonstrated the lethal efficiency of ranger training in urban warfare environments. The gunfight lasted less than 30 seconds, but the sound was deafening in the enclosed chamber as weapons fire echoed off stone walls and ricocheted through the artificial lighting. Marcus's tactical training and superior motivation proved decisive as he neutralized both threats, while Dr. Walsh maintained security over Emma's position. Carlos Mendoza fell first, his military training insufficient to overcome Marcus's superior experience and desperate determination to protect his daughter. Mitchell attempted to use Emma as leverage by threatening her directly, but his position was untenable once Carlos was eliminated and Dr. Walsh could focus her fire on his location. "It's over, Mitchell," Marcus called, his weapon trained on the criminal's position behind the damaged computer equipment. "Carlos is down, your facility is compromised, and federal agents are waiting on the surface. Surrender now, and this ends without anyone else getting hurt." Mitchell's response was predictable for someone whose criminal operation had been destroyed and whose associates had been eliminated. Rather than surrender, he attempted one final desperate action to maintain control over the tactical situation and preserve his chances of escape. The explosive device that Mitchell triggered was probably intended to collapse the tunnel system and eliminate all evidence of the criminal operation, including Emma and anyone else who could testify about the revenge network targeting Marcus's former unit. But the blast was poorly positioned and insufficiently powerful to achieve complete destruction of the facility. Marcus shielded Emma from the explosion's effects while Dr. Walsh provided covering fire that prevented Mitchell from reaching any additional weapons or explosive devices. The blast damaged the chamber's lighting and communications equipment, but the structural integrity of the cave system remained intact. Mitchell died in the explosion he had triggered, his body found later by federal investigators who would spend months unraveling the international criminal network that had orchestrated revenge operations against multiple military families. Carlos Mendoza survived his wounds long enough to provide intelligence that enabled the FBI to arrest his associates and prevent additional attacks against veterans and their families. Marcus carried Emma through the damaged tunnel system toward the vertical shaft where rope systems would lift them to the surface in safety. Dr. Walsh provided security during their movement, her medical expertise ensuring that Emma received immediate treatment for dehydration and minor injuries sustained. During her captivity, the extraction to the surface proceeded smoothly, with federal tactical teams providing security and medical personnel conducting comprehensive evaluation of Emma's condition. Agent Rodriguez coordinated the recovery of evidence from Mitchell's facility while state authorities began the process of investigating the criminal network's operations throughout the region. Emma's reunion with normal life began in a hospital room in Denver, where she received medical care and psychological support, designed to help her process the traumatic experience of kidnapping and rescue. Marcus remained at her bedside throughout the evaluation process, his own relief at her safety gradually giving way to awareness of the broader implications of what they had discovered. The investigation into Hassan's revenge network revealed the scope of the threat that had been targeting Marcus's former unit for months. 3 other children had been killed in similar operations before federal authorities became aware of the pattern. Marcus's successful rescue of Emma provided the intelligence breakthrough that enabled law enforcement to dismantle the entire organization and prevent additional attacks. 2 weeks later, Marcus and Emma returned to their quiet duplex in Riverside, where normal routines of school attendance and auto repair work gradually restored the stability that had been shattered by Emma's kidnapping. But their experience had changed both of them in ways that would shape their relationship and their understanding of the world's hidden dangers. Emma demonstrated remarkable resilience in returning to her normal activities, though she insisted on more frequent contact with Marcus throughout each day and showed increased appreciation for the security that his presence provided. Her experience had matured her in ways that were both impressive and heartbreaking for a 7-year-old child. Marcus found himself struggling with the realization that his military service continued to create risks for his family years after his return to civilian life. The skills that had enabled him to rescue Emma were the same capabilities that had made him a target for criminal retaliation, creating a paradox that would require ongoing vigilance and careful security planning. 6 months after Emma's rescue, Marcus received a letter from the Department of Veterans Affairs, recognizing his role in dismantling an international criminal network and protecting other military families from similar threats. The recognition was satisfying, but Marcus's greatest reward remained Emma's continued safety and happiness as she grew into a remarkable young woman. The auto repair shop continued to provide satisfying work and stable income, while Emma's swimming lessons at the community center resumed with increased enthusiasm and improved performance. Their quiet life in Riverside had been restored, but both father and daughter carried the knowledge that protection sometimes required extraordinary measures, and that love could motivate people to achieve impossible things. Marcus kept his military equipment in ready condition, understanding that the world contained threats that conventional law enforcement might not be prepared to handle. Emma continued to trust her father's promise that he would always protect her, having seen that promise tested under the most extreme circumstances and proven absolutely reliable. Their story became part of the larger narrative of military families adapting to civilian life while carrying the invisible burdens of service that extended far beyond their time in uniform. But their particular chapter had ended with triumph. Father's love proving stronger than organized crime, specialized training overcoming desperate circumstances, and a 7-year-old girl coming home safely to the normal life she deserved. Emma was home. Marcus was home. And somewhere in the Colorado mountains, federal investigators continued to uncover evidence of a criminal network that had finally met an opponent it couldn't intimidate or defeat. A father's determination to protect his child, supported by skills that had been forged in the crucible of military service and proven in the ultimate test of love and courage. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.